Hi, my name is Deon, and this is the Bullion Vault. I've got Willem with me as per normal, and we have actually got a special guest with us today. How are you, Willem?
I'm good in you, Deon.
Good, thank you. And our special guest, his name is Calico, and he's actually from Nigeria. So today's episode, which is episode 20, we decided that we actually want to discuss Africa. How are you doing, Calico?
Very well, thank you. It's great to be here.
And welcome to South
Thank
Africa.
you. It's getting cold though, so I'm going to leave anytime soon.
Yeah, so you came at as far as weather, you came at the wrong time because we've now got our first cold snap that's come through Johannesburg. So of course the temperatures have plummeted literally overnight. But welcome and thanks for coming in.
Thank you
And
for having me. Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you.
and just to having the discussion that we're going to have today is the relevance of Africa. We look at Africa and traditionally, from a population perspective, it's the second biggest population in the world if you take all of the, I think it's 52 or 54 states of Africa
54.
combined. Yeah,
54.
that we're the second biggest population, yet from a GDP and all of that, there's a lot of things that aren't going right. But there's also a lot of things that are going right. And today, of course, we're going to tie it to precious metals because that's what we are passionate about. And you are now being more introduced into it. So yeah, any thoughts to start with?
Well, I'm glad you said what you said about the fact that we are home to one of the world's largest resources. Just to put that into context, I think 30% of the world's resources are actually housed in Africa, but yet it only contributes about 2.5% to global GDP. So that clearly tells you that there's something wrong and there's something that needs to be done. So, and I guess this is what this conversation would be about.
Absolutely. And your thoughts, Willem?
Yeah, no, I mean, Cal has pretty much nailed it there. If you look at some of the smaller countries, some of the European countries, the GDP that they've got versus what they actually produce, what the actual output is versus Africa, it's quite skewed. It's quite disjointed and
Disproportionate.
disproportionate. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, to put it into further context, speaking of precious metals and gold in particular, Africa has 40% of the world's gold reserves,
Yes.
right? And like I said, our contribution to GDP is next to nothing. And obviously, this is because we don't take part in the value chain. All we do is just export the resource and the raw minerals without actually adding any value to it. And obviously, if we do that, we'll be able to make sure have put Africa in a better place on the GDP map.
Absolutely.
I think that is pretty much the case with just about anything, any of our resources is we export the raw, you know, whatever it might be, iron, copper, gold, silver, not particularly limited to precious metals. And it's really, it's anything that we do produce, we export the raw and then we import the refined and the
Yeah.
processed product.
But interesting on that, and I've mentioned the story before. I've been to Zambia. I've been to a number of the Southern African countries, and what I was amazed with Zambia is they, of course, are known for their copper belt, and they've got vast resources of copper. And interesting enough, they on a daily basis, if you travel the N3, which is a road that runs from the north to the south of South Africa to KwaZulu-Natal and specifically to Durban, on any given day, you will see trucks from probably about six to eight of them stacked with semi-processed copper that have come from the copper belt of Zambia, and they head down that N3, get onto a ship, get sent to China. They then process it, and we then, as a continent, buy it back in its finished form. Growing up in a family where manufacturing was the basis of what we did, I've always been passionate about manufacturing because manufacturing is a job creator. Biggest problem with South Africa right now, the biggest employer of South Africa is government. They don't produce jobs, but they indirectly are draining resources. If we had, and this is part of what I want to discuss today, is how do we actually get Africa on a better trajectory that we can actually start to benefit and have some of these resources actually working for the people?
Well, I think the answer to that is simple, Dion. It lies in governance, good governance, which is a challenge, as you know, we have across the African continent. But we're not here to discuss governance today. But I think once we're able to get our act right, as far as that is concerned, I think we'll see Africa on on a trajectory, as you mentioned. And it's nice, and it's become a topical issue in the last 6 to 9 months. I'm sure you've heard about what's happened in Burkina Faso, for example, where although it's a military government in place, but what they've actually done is put themselves in a place where they want to take control of their own natural resources, and they've cancelled all the contracts they have with the French, which is who they sold the natural resources to before. I think the same thing is happening in Mali and in Senegal. These are countries that are actually taking ownership and control of their own resources, and a lot more local participation as far as the value chain is concerned. And I think when you get countries like Nigeria and the other countries in Africa to follow that lead, I think we'll find ourselves in a much better place. It might shock you to know that, for example, the DRC, they are the biggest producers of cobalt in the world. Namibia is the largest producer of lithium. And then, but if you contrast that with what's happening in the world today, EVs and smartphones are the order of the day. And we don't have one EV or smartphone manufacturer in Africa. So it just goes to show that we really need to get at the forefront of the value chain. And like I said, we could see then, we could see Africa taking its rightful place on the global stage.
I think the one of the big problems we also have is exactly what America is facing right now with, let's bring manufacturing back. And firstly, it takes years because you need to start at the ground root. You need to start at the school level to get the skills, to get the people developed to do those jobs, to develop the industry itself. And I think that's the thing that a lot of the times people don't take into consideration. They want action now. It needs to happen now. We need to build an EV in Africa now, but we don't have the skills, we don't have the infrastructure, and that's the biggest challenge that I see for the continent as a whole, is we don't have that infrastructure to take that raw material that we have an abundance of and actually refine it to the point where we can sell it as a product.
You're right about the infrastructure and the technical skills as well. But like I said, that's where good governance comes into play. If we could get the African various governments to make sure that you have a skills transfer program with your Western entities, for example, I think, like I said, it's not going to be done overnight, but over the next 5 to 10 years, I'm sure we could see Africa emerge as one of the great manufacturing giants on the global stage.
Yeah.
Interesting enough, I mean, by 2050, 1 in 4 people will be African.
Yeah.
So again, we see an aging economy within your developed countries, being the US, being Europe, even in China. With especially with single birth rates, one child per family. That's now going to affect their aging populations. Africa, as far as the median age, is around 19. I think China was around 38, and then India was around 28. So we have the youngest generation of growth population in the world. And again, it's about now looking to make sure that we can leverage off that those youngsters actually go on to become resources for the continent.
The challenge with that, though, Deon, is that we're losing a lot of that workforce to the West, because we don't have the basic infrastructure in place, education and employment. You find that a lot of these, like you rightly said, I think about 60% of our population is under the age of 18. But what happens is, well, two things happen. First of all, there's the medical issue. And this is a case of something that happens, but in Nigeria, and I'm sure in other parts of Africa as well. Because we don't have great medical facilities in Nigeria, a lot of people opt to go and have their children when they get pregnant abroad. So what then happens is that these kids become dual citizens because they were born in America or born in Canada. They have dual citizenship with America or Canada and one African country. When they turn 18, and if they find out that there's not the right infrastructure in place for them to be economically independent, what they then do is they go abroad and they take their skills abroad. And so we lose all that workforce to the West. So again, it comes back to what I say, good government. How much are we investing in education, and how much are we investing in job creation to make sure that, Africans do stay behind, rather than ship their talent to other parts of the world.
So what's interesting is within South Africa, and of course there was quite a lot of South Africans leaving South Africa to go, professionals to go and find employment elsewhere. But what we're finding is a lot of them are actually coming back. That they've been in the UK for X amount of years, and yet still there's no place like home.
Yeah.
And again, I think for me the other big thing is we need, you know, for me, the AU is very much a talk shop. There's always big handshakes and a lot of agreements and things that happen. But when it comes down to it, I mean, intertrade between the countries within Africa is so little. And more importantly, the tariffs, and I mean, we talk of the US all the time and what old Donald Trump's done. But even within, for instance, South Africa and Nigeria, you can't just sell goods. And we have personally been in discussions about how can we stimulate your business in Nigeria and so on. But the biggest barrier to market for even inter countries within the continent is the tariffs that each country charges on each other. And it's not going to stimulate growth because it is an issue.
Yeah, that's also interesting because actually on paper, there's this thing called the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, and that's exactly what that is supposed to address: free trade among between Africans. But it's unfortunate that a lot of the African countries are still being very territorial. So, for example, the margins or the tariffs that we place on goods that we import into Africa are way higher than, say, a Ghana would do. So once you take those tariffs away and you have this free continental trade agreement, it means that we're able to access goods and services a lot cheaper because there should be free movement of goods and services. But each country is being rather territorial and protective because they know it might have short term disadvantages for their economy. And I think everybody is being a bit what I would call penny wise and pound foolish because they're not looking at the long term. Everybody's a lot more concerned about the short term.
It's a mistake that I think not only people but governments in general make. It's if you look at I mean, I'm talking about some of the more volatile countries. You don't know how long you're going to be in power. You might have done your coup today, and in a week the next one takes over. So you've got to take care of yourself in that time. But it's a problem that, I mean, it's even we're seeing it with individuals who, we've had people who bought something like some gold from us a year ago, and they're coming back now. How much can I get of a salad? And it's a case of you need to look at the long term. You need to focus on the long term because that's where the true benefits lie. And I think it's the same thing until a lot of our governments, a lot of our people start realizing that we're not in this for the short term. It might even be too late for me. I'm not that old, but it might be too late for me. But what about my children? What about their children? And that's the focus we need to have on all of this.
I'm glad you brought that up, Willem. I'm sure that's the case in South Africa, but you'll be surprised to find out that in other parts of Africa, there's a very little education and knowledge about the advantages that gold, for example, can give you from a wealth creation or a wealth preservation point of view. So there's a lot of ignorance across the continent. And it's unfortunate because those are one of the, like I just explained to you earlier on, we hold 40% of the world's gold reserves. And we as Africans are not aware of the potential of those resources, both from an individual point of view. And I think that's one of the things we collectively need to do going forward is to be able to educate people about how the role gold plays in wealth creation, wealth preservation. The other challenge we would have is also trust. We're just very not trusting of each other. So we've tried to create a gold business in Nigeria. There's a lot of heavy lifting we're going to have to do as far as authenticity is concerned. There's a lot of education we're going to have to do as far as the value that gold gives you is concerned, and so on and so forth. So you'd find out that with a business like ours in Africa, a huge amount of your marketing investment will go into just building trust and educating the masses.
Absolutely, and for me, that's the important part of this, and that's why you even sitting here today is you've seen the value of it. And I mean, we met about a year and a half ago.
Correct.
And I remember our first conversation, and you had said, you live in Nigeria, and with the naira completely collapsing to the dollar, that most Nigerians were holding dollars as a form of wealth management.
Correct.
And I said, why dollars when they should be buying gold? And your first reaction is, what do you mean?
Correct.
And it's amazing, 18 months later now, you are an absolute believer, convert to gold as an absolute form of wealth management and creation.
Now I have to go and convince 180 million other people.
Exactly, but that's exciting.
Yeah.
And for me, that's probably the most exciting part is the potential's there. We now need to just unlock it and create that story that people can resonate and actually start to see the value of what we're talking about.
Yeah, but again, there's a lot of work to be done in that regard as well. If you speak about gold specifically, I can tell you there's no one properly functioning refinery in Nigeria. So in terms of getting to the finished product itself, we're going back to the problem we spoke about earlier about exporting our raw materials and buying it back finished, refined. So again, we have to come back to the table to say, how do we make sure that this asset is accessible to the average Nigerian at an affordable price? And for that means that we now need to look inward and start to create the infrastructure to make sure that Nigerians and the rest of Africans are able to access these precious metals at an affordable price, and that value is created across the value chain, right? And make sure that the government also then benefits from it. Let me give you a very interesting statistic. We have in the ground, untapped, approximately $480 billion worth of gold. Guess what Nigeria's GDP is? $360 billion. So what that means is that we're worth more under the ground than we're above the ground. And so that goes to show the opportunity, the immense opportunity that exists as far as, tapping our natural resources are concerned.
Yeah, and we're back to the problem we had earlier of the knowledge, the infrastructure, and the actual governance behind it that's needed to extract that raw material, refine it, and then offer it as a product to the people without bringing it in and having tariffs slapped on it.
Yeah.
So, and I think this is also where you coming in now from being a Nigerian in that market, seeing the potential, and you realize that yes, it's early days, and part of what you wanting to do is to establish the first official refinery in Nigeria,
Correct.
and then start to add the value chain behind that. So it's the refining, it's the exporting it to various countries, but also again, like what we're doing in South Africa, is actually making the citizen aware of the advantage of holding gold instead of dollarized bonds or dollars per se.
Yeah, yeah. I think I was having a conversation with you earlier as well in terms of the how the value of gold is going to shoot up in the next 3 months and the value it brings to you, not just as an individual, but as a business. I think we spoke about the Basel III.
Yes.
Maybe you want to sort of tell our guests a bit more about that.
Yeah, so we actually discussed it on our last podcast,
Okay.
but for the information, and I'm hoping that we're going to get a whole lot of Nigerian people subscribing to our website or
Correct.
to our podcast, because this is part of this growth here, and that's why I wanted you to come in
Sure.
today to discuss this. Is there is Basel III, which is part of the banking regulations, global banking regulations, and gold was always considered a tier 3 asset. So essentially, in a nutshell, what that meant is the value of gold from a banking or financial perspective would only get about 40 to 60% of its actual value. Come the 1st of July 2025, they're actually changing that gold will now be a tier 1 asset. What that essentially means is its value will be 100% to the current market price. So indirectly or directly, what will now happen is banks would now start to consider gold as a hedge against certain things, but because they could also leverage liquidity from it at 100% of the value, not 40 or 60% of the value. And that is a massive game changer.
That's exciting. Like I said, a lot of education needs to be done. Well, the funny thing is though that the people in Nigeria who actually appreciate and recognize the value of gold are the working class. So, for example, the market women in the southwest of Nigeria and some northerners obviously from the northern Nigeria who have traditionally used gold and traded gold and use it as a means of inheritance to pass on to other generations. What's not What's not happening at the moment is that there seems to be a lack of awareness of that value amongst the middle class in Nigeria. And they still opt for your traditional forms of investment, which, as you know, are prone to all kinds of market forces, etc. Gold, as we know, does not appreciate according to the standard of living and does not fall prey to things that happen in the stock markets and so on and so forth. So I think the advice and the education we need to make sure that everyone is aware about is that gold obviously serves as a good hedge against your traditional forms of investment. And that's obviously what I'm trying to make sure that I make Nigerians and perhaps the rest of West Africa aware of.
Yeah, the problem is, you said the one thing there, the middle class that is not aware of, and that's a tough nut to crack, because if you look at the middle class, they actually, in general, have less expendable income. They make enough to cover their rent or their house, their car, their groceries, and at the end of the month, there's not a lot left over. And that's the thing is, getting them to understand that they do not have to buy a full ounce of gold. They can buy perhaps a gram here and there. So it's also that mind shift, because I think the problem is that a lot of people still think gold, and they see these big TV bars, the movie bars, the 12-kilogram Fort Knox bars, and they know that it costs millions. And
so that's you're referring to fractional ownership
Exactly.
of gold. And again, like I said, there's a huge education piece that we need to make sure that we deliver to the Nigerian market, to the middle class, to say that you don't have to spend, I don't know, in our currency, 5 million naira to own a gold coin. You can save, you can pay month by month, and as you slowly accumulate your wealth over time. So these are the things that we're trying to make sure that we make the Nigerian market aware of. There's also the HNIs as well, who traditionally will have the dollars or the lots of naira in the bank accounts, and not realizing that if they held it in gold, it would appreciate faster than if they could help put their naira or their dollars in the bank account. We actually did a recent survey about 6 to 9 months ago, amongst dipstick survey, but a survey nonetheless, just to understand Nigeria's understanding for gold as a store of value. And I think it was about 74% that came back and said they were not aware of the value or the potential that gold could give them in terms of ownership and appreciation over time and wealth creation over time. So again, education is the one thing that we need to do, followed by making sure that we build trust.
Absolutely. And again, I think you've raised, and it's exciting because we also see the same way for us in this country, that I've always said, and my big believer is we need to empower the masses. And the best way to do that is to show them the value of commodities, of holding gold as a form of wealth creation. And we speak of generational wealth. Now, I know that story you mentioned of the women in northern Nigeria, where they're actually consciously already doing that. It's almost now to start to create a trend from that, saying, guys, there is a way and means to do this, and we can create a full network that actually balances and almost drives that kind of thought process already.
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, it's funny that you mention the people not understanding the value of the gold, because we actually did some studies on that, and Nigerian naira was one of the ones that were included in that study, and I can't remember for the life of me how much Nigerian naira. We said it was 20 million, or was it something like that?
What to
The usual one we do on 1 million rand, 1 million pesos.
Yeah.
And I think we did something. It's something like 5 or 20 million. I'm not 100%.
Well, I think I don't remember the actual numbers, but what I do remember is that had you purchased a certain amount of gold 3 years ago, the return on your investment would have been more than it would be if you invested it in property, in stocks, and any other of the investment instruments. That I do remember.
Yeah, and what I think what we eventually ended up with was, had you kept that in a bank account, it would have been worth 7.78 million naira. Yes. If you had invested it in gold, would be 45 million. So that's the
Your memory is a lot better than mine.
I had some help. I'll be honest. I had some help here.
But again, we're driving the important thing here, and we speak a lot on this podcast about we talk on the West and Donald Trump, and we talk global economies, and also we know that globally there is a lot of issues economically, and we know that gold has always been a hedge against that. It's always a hedge against inflation, and this is it serves such a perfect case to where as you said. I mean, the naira people, to the extent were holding dollars, the government then said, you know what, we'll create dollarized bonds, and of course most people are very, they don't trust their governments, to put it in a very polite way.
Correct.
So that whole concept has not been taken up to the extent that they anticipated or hoped.
Yes, yes. No, you're correct. But like I said, it's something that we're working on. We're trying to build relationships with the Nigerian government as well to make them realize the value, obviously, that gold. I think as an economy in Nigeria, we've been too dependent on oil because that is our major natural resource.
Yeah.
And only recently have we just built a refinery in Nigeria where we're now able to refine our own oil. It's taken about 40 years. I'm hoping we don't make the mistake with the other resources that we have. The Chinese are very present in Nigeria, taking out the raw material at a much cheaper price than they would do if we're able to refine it to a doré state or even a refined state, a purely refined state, for example. Again, thus adding value to our economy. So I'm hoping that we don't make the same mistake we made with our oil resources.
What's also interesting, and I know this from Ghana, where they've recently gone and made made it law that all your artisanal miners and so on can no longer sell directly. It needs to go through government. And the hope here is what's happening, and I know that in Nigeria, where you get a lot of people buying gold at very low values from artisanal miners, and literally arriving with an airplane, loading up and flying out. So there's no tax benefit to the government, none of that. And Ghana, I think, earmarked that as a massive issue. So they're now almost incentivizing the artisanal guys to come through government. We will ensure that you get a better price than what you would have got from, say, a Chinese company or an Indian company or any of those or Western European companies. But the important thing is that I think creating the right infrastructure, and this is what you're really saying now, is what's needed.
Yes.
And I think through some of the people and some of the stakeholders that you're already talking to, it sounds like that's where it's going to be going.
Sure. No, you're right. So it's that, but there's also a few challenges. Obviously, with everything, there's always a risk and reward.
Yeah.
And I think some of the challenges that we need to consider is, as we grow this industry, the regulatory framework is not exactly clear on how we deal with these kind of issues. And we just hope that it doesn't get to a point where it's counterproductive to what we're trying to do in terms of building the Nigerian economy and building that sector with with excessive taxation and so on and so forth. The other issue we have, of course, is that of illicit mining, which I explained to you earlier, where a lot of that stuff is being smuggled out of Nigeria and no real reward is coming back to the Nigerian government. And then one of the challenges we're going to have, which is where the trust comes in again, is purity. How do we know that this gold is worth what we say it's worth? Seeing that we've seen a lot of scams come and go in the past, and a lot of Africans don't just take things on face value. So, and unfortunately, I think we then have to educate people in terms of how you test on the purity of gold so that every man is able to do that for himself. And then also making sure that there's some sort of standardization that we bring into play in that industry as well, so that we're able to certify at every point the quality of the minerals, of the metals that we're trying to produce in Nigeria. Otherwise, you find that there will be a lot of imitations, a lot of fakes, and before you know it, it becomes a very corrupt industry, and then we find ourselves back to square one, and becomes a problem.
Being involved in a lot of the bulk bullion trading that's done within Africa, and it's very scam heavy. So for every one successful trade or contract that's taken out, there's probably 50 plus that are actual illegitimate and scam worthy. So again, I think what's important here is to get the right things in place so we can minimize that. And again, what Ghana's done by removing that easy access to the lower end is going to start to change that. Where if you had to go to Ghana now, and I know of people that literally went there and they went with dollars to get this and get that, and suddenly guys rush into the hotels all wearing military kits and guns, and before they can even blink, their dollars are gone, and they don't even know who or what those people were.
No, I don't know for certain if that's the case in Nigeria, but what can say is that I will give credit to the Nigerian government. They are really making sure that the mining sector, especially as far as gold and silver are concerned, is being regulated, and to make sure that there's sort of control that is being brought to bear on that sector. So there's a lot of initiatives that are being introduced in Nigeria at the moment, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot more to come in the future. I think this is the one government that has taken our mining sector as seriously as they should, recognizing that we can't continue to depend on oil forever, and we need to find a way to make sure that we're able to grow our economy and therefore our GDP through investment in other industries.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think as soon as they realize there's an appetite for it, especially among the middle class, and that goes back to educating them towards this. As soon as the appetite is created, then government will step in and say, okay, well, there's an industry to be made here, and the problem or the trick is to find that balance between regulation and not over-regulated, not under-regulated. Just walk that fine line, because you over-regulated, it becomes impossible. You under-regulated, you've got all of the probably not the artisanal miners, but then you open up the door for scammers. And the biggest problem is to not actually leave room for those scammers to flood the market with their fake products. And I mean, we all know trust is very fragile. It takes forever to build. It's very easy to break. And
I think also we can't necessarily put everything on the shoulders of the government. I think there's also a huge role for private enterprise to play as well.
Absolutely.
And I think this growth is really going to be driven by the private sector with the support of the government. The other opportunities I see is also collaboration, not necessarily in trade, but also in expertise. So, for example, we have the opportunities in Nigeria, the expertise lies in South Africa. How do we all collaborate to make sure that we're helping each other lift each other out of the doldrums, as it were, and to make sure that because I know obviously through its history, South Africa probably is the leading nation in Africa as far as the mining sector is concerned and as far as the refining sector is concerned. How do we make sure that those skills are then spread across the rest of Africa so that we're able to build and build our own economies for ourselves? So I think there's a lot of room for a lot of collaboration going forward, and I think that has to be driven by the private sector, supported by our respective governments, but also managed holistically by organizations like the AU and this Africa Free Trade Agreement that I spoke about earlier.
And that also is going to be one of the most important parts is, and you nailed it right squarely on the head, is we can ask for government to have intervention. Sometimes it becomes over intensive with policies, and South Africa is at that point where we burdened with policies from financial requirements to everything, tax and everything. Not to say that they're not necessary, but it kind of also throttles the potential. But you 100% right. The only way this will work is by getting getting the commercial sector involved, and they can show the commercial feasibility of it, and in turn government receives taxes on that.
Correct.
We can get that point right, you will get buy-in at the right level with the right people.
I 100% agree with you, Deon. And so the rest remains to be seen. Let's see how we can all collaborate. That's why I'm here, to collaborate. And
Absolutely.
so I we're looking forward to a very successful partnership going forward. And like I said, I truly believe that Africa is the next continent, the next empire, as it were. With what's going on in America at the moment, there's nothing to say that Africa cannot step up and then replace it and become one of the greatest global economies in the world.
The potential's there. The potential is 100% there, and that's the thing is to unlocking that potential. You know, we need government intervention, but to a point. But I do believe it is in the hands of the people like us, where there is a vision, there is a drive, and there's that need to also educate. So we can get all those things together and done correctly, then everyone wins.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Willem, anything on your side?
No, I think, I mean, it's been great to have Cal. He absolutely hit it square on the head there.
Okay.
And Cal, thanks again. Thanks for coming out. I know it's been a quick visit, and we hope to host you again on the podcast, but maybe next time in Nigeria. That would be exciting.
That will be fun. That will be fun. Thank you very much, Deon. Thank you very much, Willem. It's been great to be on this show, and I look forward to coming back again.
Awesome. Willem, just in closing, if there's anything else that you'd like to say?
If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, and if you want to see some more, be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next video.
Thank you and take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.